State line, 597 BCE. The Babylon Chronicles put it starkly. Year 7, month Kislevu. The king laid siege to the city of Judah and took it on the 2nd day of the month. He appointed in it a king of his liking, took heavy booty from it, and brought it into Babylon. The books of the Judean kings tell us more. That booty includes people. Many people. The royal family, the nobles, the army, the blacksmiths, anyone who knew a craft. So many people, the book says, that only the poorest of the land escaped deportation. It's as if the United States were suddenly emptied of everyone who had held a high school diploma, practiced a trade, owned a home, ran a business, or worked in government. All these people were pulled from everything that had been their lives and marched at sword point to Babylon. Most were sent to the site of a destroyed city near the Chebar Canal and set to work rebuilding the ruins. They had lost family, social status, and material possessions. Their temple, where the Most High God had chosen to place his name, had been destroyed. They had seen people die during the siege and the long trip to Babylon. They had been forced to leave hilly, temperate Judah, to live in the hot and flat Babylonian lowlands, where they toiled at hard manual labor. Their captor king proved strong and victorious, and it soon became clear that no one would come to their aid. They lived in a foreign land, could no longer call themselves a people, and lacked the resources to do anything about it. So they collapsed into their huts each night, backs aching and hands blistered, and lost hope. This shattered and captive nation saw no way out and braced despair. God, who had guided their ancestors and made them a people, was back home in Jerusalem. Surely God was not there in this desolate place. The prophet among them saw it a different way. Dead, dry, heaps of bones. Not connected to each other, not one, just piles. Baked and so bleached by the sun that any hint of moisture is long gone. No life to be found here. Hope blasted to smithereens, the people as good as dead. Perhaps we can relate, or know someone who might. We are not exiles or prisoners of war, but despair and hopelessness come in many forms. The beloved spouse, partner, or child lost quickly and way too soon. The sudden illness which changes life dramatically and paints a question mark over the future. The dreamed of job vanished in the wake of changing times and cultures. Or perhaps the experiences which drain a life are less individual, more communal. Some may find their energy sapped by a society which always puts their community at the back of the line, requiring more effort, more strength, just to live. Public health researcher and professor Arlene Geronimus has investigated the stressors that impact people of color, which are chronic and repeated throughout their lives. She coined the term weathering to describe the impact of repeated exposure to socioeconomic adversity, political marginalization, racism, and perpetual discrimination. She found that racism and racial discrimination do not just jeopardize people's lives directly. Through violent acts and hate crimes perpetuated by those who hold racist beliefs. Discrimination and marginalization can also slowly chip away at one's health, causing those who are at the receiving end of discriminatory attitudes to age or even die prematurely. There are many ways that we can be suffering inside and still have physical life. It can indeed seem as if God cannot reach us in these places of struggle, as if we left God behind somehow. But because this is a story of God, that's not the end of the matter. One day, sometime after the arrival in Babylon, the prophet brings a word to this demoralized and shattered people. I saw something today, he says. He tells them about the Valley of Bones, the picture of their life now, the essence of their despair. I can imagine the people around him, fatigue on their faces, only half listening. When that ridiculous question comes, can these bones live? I see their heads shake above their slumped shoulders. Of course not, they answer. But Ezekiel, maybe because he is a prophet, has a different reply. I don't know, he says, but God does. And the valley of death, amazingly, astoundingly, becomes a place of new life. Under God's direction, the bones are put together again, reknit, a host of new bodies made, remade. Astonishing, extraordinary, but still lifeless. And then the final transformation. The bodies receive God's breath. The wind which hovered over the water at the creation of the world enters them, and they stand up and live. And Ezekiel turns to the gathered exiles and gives them God's promise of renewal. He does not blame them for their despair. He acknowledges that they are the living dead now and tells them that that will not always be so. The graves in which they find themselves will be opened, he says, and they will be returned to Israel. To them and us, he declares that when God is involved, nothing is hopeless. When the breath of God touches despair, it brings life. Perhaps we can relate or know someone who might. Have you had these kinds of experiences in your life? The situation is hard and demanding and deeply painful. If you had a choice, you would not go through it. You certainly would never wish such a time upon any other person. And the changes, when they come, do not fix the painful circumstances as if they had never occurred. And at the very same time, you realize that that tough experience has brought precious gifts. That life-changing illness connects us to others and brings a community of support and encouragement. The love grown for lost spouse, partner, or child in time becomes a spring from which we can draw to care for others. The undesired job after layoffs uncovers unknown gifts and new purpose. The exiles of Babylon would never forget their exile, or the hard times and labor that they endured. They would continue to grieve those that they had lost. And when, excuse me, and when they are finally allowed to return to Jerusalem, they go home as different people from the ones who have been dragged into exile. Excuse me. Eventually, the Persian king sends them to rebuild their temple and community. And with God's help, they do it. God's presence may be seen in the midst of difficult times and challenging struggles, as well as in the good times. God does not save us from pain or injustice, loss, or struggle. At the same time, God also does not send us such things to somehow make us better people. The point is that God understands despair, is with us in the darkness, thank you, and can help us to find places of resurrection in it. God is not lax back there in the better times, but there with us in the midst of the exile and the struggle. That does not mean that God totally fixes things as if they didn't happen. When Jesus was resurrected, his body bore the scars of his passion. They were not whisked away. The trials mattered. I always think of that tiny ragtag group of peasants that Jesus called as his disciples, left behind after he is crucified under the crushing might of the Roman Empire. The handful of people from a backwater region who, for love, got busy turning that empire upside down. Less than 300 years later, because of their efforts, Constantine declares Christianity the faith of the entire empire. With God, despair never has the last word. Those touched by the breath of God see life break out in the darkest corners. God does not chide us for finding ourselves in the dark, but joins us in it and lights it with life. In telling his vision, Ezekiel challenges his people and all of us to see things differently. Can these bones live? Of course not. But look at them through God's eyes and watch tibia rushing to join fibula, patella to femur. Watch as ligaments bind them together, flesh enrobes them, and skin seals them tightly. Watch as God's Spirit, which heals hopelessness, infuses them so that they rise, a great number transformed by the breath of the Holy One. Know that God is not constrained by time, place, or circumstance, but is present with us everywhere and always. Even now, for those of us currently in our own version of Babylon. Nobel Prize winner and Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel has said that Ezekiel's vision of the valley bears no date because every generation needs to hear in its own time that the bones can live again. As followers of a God who dies, Christians are the very definition of those who see life beyond the edge of despair. The resurrection is the embodiment of hope when all hope is gone. It did not just come at the end of time, at the end of a life, but here, now, every day, to those who, like the prophet, know to pay attention. As Episcopal monk James Kerster puts it, wherever in your life is victory, there is resurrection. Wherever in your life is joy, there is resurrection. Wherever in your life is wonder, there is resurrection. Wherever in your life is resurrection, there is Christ calling you to follow him out of death into his larger and more glorious life. God brings us new life, not only at the end of our earthly existence, but now, amidst our trials and struggles. Dateline, 2023. The nation that can no longer call itself a people has outlasted Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon by centuries. Through the breath of God, the dry bones lived.
Amen.
Amen.